The moment Sarah stepped into the upscale restaurant, she knew she'd made a mistake. The crystal chandeliers caught the worn threads of her only good dress, a simple navy number she'd found at a thrift store 3 years ago. Her shoes, polished until her arms ached, still couldn't hide the scuff marks that told stories of bus stops and double shifts. She'd almost canceled this blind date 5 times. Her sister had set it up, insisting that Sarah needed one evening of happiness, after working 70-hour weeks cleaning houses across the city. But now, watching elegantly dressed couples glide past marble columns, Sarah felt the familiar weight of shame settling on her shoulders like an old, unwelcome friend. "Table for Chen," she whispered to the hostess, who looked her up and down with barely concealed disdain. "This way." The word came out clipped, cold. Marcus Chen was already seated, and Sarah's heart sank further. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, his watch glinting under the soft lighting. When he stood to greet her, his smile seemed genuine enough, but Sarah had learned to read the subtle shifts in people's expressions, the microsecond of assessment, the slight tightening around the eyes. "Sarah, I'm Marcus. Please, sit down." He pulled out her chair, and she lowered herself carefully, hyper-aware of every movement. They'd barely exchanged pleasantries when another man approached their table. Tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to check a price tag, he clapped Marcus on the shoulder with familiarity that bordered on possessiveness. "Marcus, didn't expect to see you here." The newcomer's eyes slid to Sarah, and something cold flickered across his face. "And who's this?" "Brad, this is Sarah." "Sarah, Brad, we went to business school together." Brad's handshake was limp, dismissive. He pulled up a chair without invitation, his presence immediately dominating the space. "So, Sarah, what do you do?" The question felt like a trap. Sarah straightened her spine, lifting her chin. "I'm a house cleaner." The silence that followed lasted only seconds but felt eternal. Brad's eyebrows rose, and a smirk played at the corners of his mouth. "A maid, really?" He turned to Marcus with exaggerated disbelief. "Marcus, I thought you'd learned your lesson about, well, dating outside your league." Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks. She started to stand, but Marcus touched her hand gently. "Brad, no, let me finish." Brad leaned back, his voice carrying to nearby tables. "I mean, come on. You're Marcus Chen. Your family practically owns half the tech industry in this city. And you're here with someone who scrubs toilets for a living." He laughed, sharp and cruel. "What's next? You going to marry your gardener?" Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for her purse. She'd endured plenty of humiliation in her life, customers who treated her as invisible, people who assumed she was stupid because she cleaned their homes, but this public degradation felt like a final straw. "I should go." "Please don't." Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. He stood, positioning himself between Sarah and Brad. "Actually, Brad, I think you should be the one leaving." "What? I'm just being honest. She doesn't belong here, Marcus. Look at her dress, her shoes. This is Marcello's, not some diner." Something shifted in Marcus's demeanor. His polite smile vanished, replaced by an expression Sarah couldn't quite read, part anger, part disappointment, entirely resolute. "You're right about one thing, Brad. This is Marcello's." Marcus pulled out his phone, tapped the screen twice, and held it up. "My restaurant." Brad's smirk faltered. "You're what?" "I own this restaurant. And the building it's in. And since we're being honest about who belongs where, I don't think someone who measures human worth by the price of their clothing belongs anywhere near my establishment." The color drained from Brad's face. "Marcus, I didn't, I was just joking around." "No, you were being cruel. There's a difference." Marcus's voice remained level, but Sarah heard steel underneath. "Sarah works harder in a day than you probably have in your entire life. She supports her family, puts herself through night school, and still manages to show kindness to everyone she meets. I know this because I've actually talked to her sister, learned about her life, instead of judging her by superficial standards." Sarah stared at Marcus, stunned. He'd done research. He'd cared enough to learn about her. "Do you know what Sarah did last month?" Marcus continued, his eyes never leaving Brad's increasingly uncomfortable face. "She found a wallet in one of the houses she cleans. It had $3,000 in it. She could have kept it, God knows she needed it, but she tracked down the owner and returned every cent. That's character, Brad. That's integrity." What have you done lately besides inheriting your father's company and running it into the ground? Brad stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. You're making a mistake, Marcus. The only mistake I made was calling you a friend. Marcus gestured to the hostess. Please escort Mr. Bradford out. He's no longer welcome here. As Brad stormed away, muttering under his breath, the restaurant seemed to collectively exhale. Sarah remained frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. When Marcus sat back down, his expression softened. I'm so sorry about that. Brad's always been a jerk, but I never thought. He shook his head. Are you okay? You own this restaurant. Sarah's voice came out barely above a whisper. I own several restaurants. And some tech companies, investment properties. The stuff Brad mentioned about my family isn't wrong. But here's what he doesn't understand. My grandmother cleaned houses. My mother worked 3 jobs to put my father through college. I know exactly how hard you work, Sarah, because I grew up watching that same determination every single day. Tears pricked Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back. Why didn't you tell me about who you are? Because I wanted you to meet me, not my bank account. When your sister told me about you, about how you work yourself to exhaustion to send money home to your parents, how you're studying to become a nurse, how you still volunteer at the homeless shelter every Sunday despite barely having time to sleep, I wanted to know the person who does all that. The real you. A waiter appeared with champagne and menus that hadn't been on the table moments before. Marcus waved him off gently. Actually, could you bring us whatever Sarah wants? And not the regular menu, bring the real one, the one we use for family meals in the kitchen. Sarah's throat tightened. I don't understand. The best food isn't always the most expensive food. It's the food made with love, with care, with the knowledge that someone's going to appreciate every bite. Marcus smiled, and this time Sarah saw past the expensive suit to something genuine underneath. My grandmother taught me that. She also taught me that the measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they do with what they've been given. I don't have much to give, Sarah admitted softly. You give kindness when people expect judgment. You give honesty when dishonesty would be easier. You give your time, your energy, your compassion, even when you're exhausted. Marcus leaned forward. Sarah, you give everything that actually matters. The waiter returned with plates of food that smelled like home, simple, hearty, real. As they ate, they talked. Not about money or status or the vast gulf between their circumstances, but about dreams and fears and the strange, beautiful complexity of trying to build a life worth living. Hours later, as Marcus walked Sarah to her bus stop, refusing to let her refuse a ride home, he took her hand. I know this was probably the worst first date in history, he said, laughing softly. But would you be willing to try again? Maybe somewhere less dramatic. Sarah looked at this man who had defended her, who had seen past the worn dress and scuffed shoes to the person underneath. Only if you let me cook. Real food, nothing fancy. I'd like that. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. I'd like that very much. As the bus pulled away, Sarah watched him grow smaller in the rear window, this unlikely man who had turned what should have been her most humiliating moment into something else entirely. A reminder that kindness exists, that people can surprise you, that sometimes the world tilts toward justice instead of cruelty. She didn't know if this would become a love story or simply a friendship or just a cherished memory. But for the first time in years, Sarah felt something she'd almost forgotten, hope. And that, she thought, might be the most valuable gift of all.